All right, today we're going to be going over the Algebra 1 End of Course Test Study Guide. So looking at number 1, it says find the common difference of the following sequence. So common difference means that we are adding or subtracting by the same number every single time. So looking at our sequence, we have 7, 11, 15. So to get from 7 to 11, if I can't think of that on the top of my head or doing some mental math, then I'm going to come over to the side and I'm going to do 11 minus 7, which is going to give me 4. So that means here I'm adding 4 every time to get to the next term. But we want to make sure that this number is common, so I need to check it again between the next two terms. So 11 to 15, I would do 15 minus 11, which is also going to give me 4. So this is a common difference, so that means our common difference is a positive 4. Number 2, we're going to find the common ratio of the following sequence. So ratio is when you're multiplying by the same number every time. So our sequence is 3, 15, 75. So I need to figure out what I have to multiply by to get from 3 to 15. So I'm going to come over to the side and do 15 divided by 3, and that's going to give me a positive 5. So that means I'm multiplying by 5 here. But just like last time, we have to check it and make sure that the next term is going to be multiplying by 5. So I'm going to do 75 divided by 15, which will give me 5. So that means our common ratio is going to be a positive 5. All right, number 3, it says find A28 of the following sequence, 19, 13, 7. So remember, we're going to use our explicit formula for arithmetic sequences, which looks like this. So we need our A1 and we need our common difference. So A1 is whatever the sequence starts with, which in this case is 19. And then our common difference is what we're adding or subtracting by every time. So to get from 19 to 13, I'm subtracting 6. And to get from 13 to 7, I'm subtracting 6. So my common difference is a negative 6. So I'm going to put that in here. And then we're finding A28. So wherever the letter N is, I'm going to replace it with a 28. Now with these, you can just take this and type it into the calculator. And when you do that, you should get negative 143. All right, number 4, we're finding G15 of the following sequence. So our formula for geometric sequences is G1 times R to the n minus 1 power. So again, we need our first term, which is 3. And then our R value is whatever we're multiplying or dividing by. So to get from 3 to negative 6, I would do negative 6 divided by 3, which is going to give me negative 2. And then to get from negative 6 to positive 12, I also multiply by negative 2. So my R is negative 2, so I'm going to put that in for R. So I'm going to have 3 times negative 2. And then we're finding the 15th term, so I'm going to put 15 in for n. Now, just like with the last one, you can type this into your calculator, and you are going to get a pretty big number, so don't freak out when you get that. You should get 49,152. All right, number 5. It says, find the formula of the given sequence. So we have to figure out whether it's arithmetic or geometric. So to do that, to get from negative 1 to 2, if I was adding or subtracting, I would do 2 minus negative 1, which would give me a positive 3. But then if I do negative 4 minus 2, that gives me a negative 6. So we're not adding or subtracting because these numbers are not common. So now I have to figure out what we're multiplying by every time. So I would do 2 divided by negative 1 which is going to give me a negative 2. And then negative 4 divided by 2 is also going to give me a negative 2. So that means my common ratio is negative 2. So we're plugging it into this formula. So I need an R value, which we just found was negative 2, and I need my G1, which is just negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 2 to the n minus 1 would be our formula. All right, and those 5 questions came from Unit 1, so if you're feeling not very confident in any of that, just try and find that Unit 1 packet and kind of look over it to see if that rejogs your memory on any of these things. So the next couple questions are going to be on Unit 2, which was about functions. So here it says, if f of x equals x squared plus 3x minus 2, they want us to find f of 2. So when you see a question like this, you're just taking the number that's in parentheses and replacing it with the letter, or you're replacing x with that number. So I would do 2 squared plus 3 times 2 minus 2. Okay, I just took the x and replaced it with a 2. So then you can type that into your calculator, and when you do, it will give you a positive 8. All right, let's do another one. Number 7 says, if g of x is 3x minus 2, find g of 8 minus g of 5. So first I need to find g of 8 and g of 5 before I can subtract them. So for g of 8, I'm going to do 3 parentheses 8 minus 2, which gives me 22. And then I'm going to do g of 5, which is 3 times 5 minus 2, which if I type that in my calculator, it will give me 13. So now that I have g of 8 and g of 5, I'm going to do what it told me to do, which was subtract them. So 22 minus 13 is going to give me 9. All right, number 8, we're given a graph, and it says identify the zeros of the function. So the zeros it's where the graph touches the x-axis. And we also just did a unit, in the Unit 6 unit, we called them roots. So that's also another name for them. So here the graph is touching it twice, and I want those numbers. So this is 1, 2, that's a negative 3, and then this is a positive 1. So when I write my solution, I'm going to use my squiggly brackets because we're making a list, and I put the smaller number first, so negative 3, 1. All right, number 9, we're doing the same thing, identifying the zeros of the function below. So this time we just have a straight line, and it only touches the x-axis at this one point, which is a positive 1. So I'll just have x equals squiggly bracket 1. All right, number 10, we're going to solve and graph the inequality below. So remember, we're just solving an equation like we normally would. So first, we must get rid of the parentheses. So right now, we have a minus sign in front of our parentheses, which represents a negative 1. So I have to distribute that negative 1 to the two things in parentheses, and that's using multiplication. So negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x, and negative 1 times negative 4 is a positive 4. Now everything else I'm just going to bring down because I haven't messed with it yet. Now I can combine any like terms that I have before I start moving things to the other side. So 2 and 4 are like terms, so I'm going to add those together, and that's going to give me 6. So I'm left with negative 2x plus 6 is greater than 4. Now I want to move all my regular numbers to the right side, so that means I need to move this positive 6 to the other side, and I do that by subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. So that leaves me with negative 2x is greater than negative 2. And then our last step is to divide. I ran out of room, so I'm going to come up here. So the one thing about inequalities that's different than an equation is that when you divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality sign. So since we're dividing by a negative 2, our inequality sign is going to flip to less than. So I'm going to have x is less than 1 as my solution. Okay, so remember, if it is less than or greater than, it's an open circle, but if it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, it's a closed circle. So this is just less than, so I'm going to have an open circle on 1, and then since it's less than, I'm going to shade to the left. All right, let's look at number 11. So which relation represents a function? Please place a check mark in the box for all that apply. So remember, something with a function, if you're looking at a table, ordered pairs, or mapping, the x values cannot repeat. So like here, as an example, this 5 is being used twice. It goes to the 0 and to the 8. So since it's being used twice, this one is not a function. But looking at my table, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. None of those numbers repeat, so that's a function. Looking at my ordered pairs, I have -4, -1, 0, and 5. None of those repeat, so that's a function. And then looking at this mapping, each x value only has one arrow coming out of it, so that would also be a function. Now, when you're looking at a graph, what you have to do is the vertical line test. So if I were to take my pencil and drag it across my graph, okay, and if it hits my pencil at 2 different points at the same time, that means that that would not be a function. So this graph right here is actually not a function because it's hitting my pencil up here and down here at the exact same time. But if I come over to this graph, it's not hitting my pencil at more than one spot because it's hitting it here, but it's not hitting it anywhere else. Okay, and if I keep dragging it, that rule still applies. It's only ever hitting it at one spot at a time. So this one is a function. All right, so that's all for Unit 2. That was on functions, linear functions. So remember, if you are kind of rusty on some of that, just pull that packet out, kind of look it over to familiarize yourself with those topics again. All right, the next couple questions are in Unit 3, which was solving system of equations. So looking at number 12, we're going to solve this one. And I'm going to use elimination because we have a variable with common coefficients. These x's both have a positive 1 in front. So since they have common coefficients and they have the same sign, I'm going to subtract. So 1x minus 1x is 0. 4y minus -2y is 6y, and 19 minus 1 is 18. Now from here, I'm just going to solve for y, so I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides, so y is going to be 3. But remember, for a system of equation, you have to have an x and a y value, so I'm going to take that y value and plug it in for x. So I'm going to plug it into the second equation. So x minus 2y equals 1. And I'm going to take the 3 and plug it in for y. So x minus 2 times 3 equals 1. So that gives me x minus 6 equals 1. Then I'm going to add 6 to both sides, so I get x equals 7. So my answer would be my x comma my y, so 7 comma 3. All right, number 13, we have 2x plus 8y equals 6 and 5x plus 20y equals 15. So I'm not going to use substitution because I don't have a letter without a number beside it. So I'm going to use elimination, but I have to have common coefficients. So I have to multiply one or both of the equations by a number to get a common coefficient. So I want both of my numbers in front of x to be 10. So in order to do that, I have to multiply my first equation by 5 because 5 times 2 is 10. So that gives me 10x plus 40y equals 30. Now I'm going to do the second equation, and I'm going to multiply it by 2 so that I can get a 10 in front of the x. So 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 20 is 40, and 2 times 15 is 30. So now I'm left with those two equations. And what is one thing that you notice about those? Okay, you should notice that they're the exact same equation. So when that happens, that means that you are going to have an infinite amount of solutions. All right. Number 14 says, which graph represents the solution to the following inequality? So remember, for inequalities, you shade above or below. So we have y is less than or equal to 2x plus 1. So less than or equal to, since it's less than, means I'm going to shade below. So I want to look at my lines and this line on all of my graphs is going to be that first line. So when it's shading below, that means that this section needs to be shaded. Okay, so now for the second line, that equation is not written in slope-intercept form. So we need to move it to slope-intercept form. Okay, so that is greater than or equal to, so that means we're going to shade above. So that's this line, and I want my solution to be above. So now, when I'm looking at my answer choices, I want where red and blue overlap to be the dark gray region that's on that paper. So it's not that one, not that one, not that one. So it is D because right here they are being overlapped. Okay, that's actually an exact question on your test, so I would make sure that you remember that answer. All right, so that's all from Unit 3, just a couple of system of equation problems. Now we're on to Unit 4, which was on probability. So we're going to look at a couple of different things. So first, it says the Venn diagram below shows the number of students in Mrs. Crane's homeroom who were on honor roll, taking advanced classes, or had perfect attendance for the first quarter. So number 15, how many students are taking advanced classes? So that means what's the total number of students in my advanced classes circle? So 2 times 5, no, sorry, not times. 2 plus 5 plus 1 plus 2. means that that is 10 students taking advanced classes. All right, number 16, how many students are on honor roll or had perfect attendance? So or means everything in both circles. So on honor roll or perfect attendance. So I want to add up those 6 numbers. So 9 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 4, which is going to give me 21. And then 17, how many students are taking advanced classes and honor roll but did not have perfect attendance? So advanced classes and honor roll, and means that they have to do both. So I'm only looking at that overlapping section right there. But we don't want them to have perfect attendance. So here's my perfect attendance circle. So I can't count that 1. So that only leaves me with 2. All right, number 18, the spinner below is spun 2 times. How many possible outcomes? So that means you want to take however many sections are on that spinner and multiply it by itself. So if I count all the way around, there are 18 sections on that spinner. So that's my number of possible outcomes for the first spin. Now I'm going to spin it again, and I also have 18 possible outcomes. So when I multiply those together, I get 324. All right, number 19, a brand of jeans comes in 9 different washes, 5 different fit styles, and 3 different height options. If 2 wash options are out of stock, so that leaves me with 7, how many ways can someone order the single pair of jeans? So I just multiply those 3 numbers together, 7 times 5 times 3, which leaves me with 105. All right, number 20, we have a 2-way table, and it says a group of coffee drinkers were asked if they prefer their coffee black or with cream and sugar, and if they prefer caffeine or decaf. The results are shown below. If a person from this group is chosen at random, find each probability. So remember, when you're doing a 2-way table, the first thing you want to do is go ahead and make your total column and row if it did not come with one, because that's going to help you out a lot when you're starting to do these problems. All right. So there are my totals. So now we can answer the question. So what's the probability that they drink black decaf coffee? So black coffee and decaf coffee, that would be 12. So 12 out of however many were in the survey, 125. And then you'll need to type that in and make sure the fraction is simplified. Number 21, it says, what's the probability that they have caffeine given that it's with cream and or sugar? So remember, when that bar is there, this total goes on the bottom of my fraction. So the total for cream and sugar is 87. Okay, so out of those 87, how many have caffeine in their coffee? 64. And then you'll also need to make sure that that fraction is simplified. All right, so that's all the questions from Unit 4, which we did back in January, so I know that was a super long time ago. So I tried to not put too many questions about that on there. All right, number 22 through 24, we're talking about the exponent rules. All right, these are y'all's favorite. So right now we have 2 things being multiplied together, and one of them has a little exponent on the outside. So that is what I need to get rid of first. So when you have that little bitty exponent on the outside, you distribute it to everything on the inside. So that would give me negative 2 to the third power. And then for my variables, I multiply my exponents. So I would do 3 times 2, which is 6, and then 3 times 1, which is 3. Then I'm just going to bring the 5ab down. And I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. All right, so now we have two things being multiplied with exponents. So my numbers in front, my bigger numbers, my coefficients, we just multiply those together. So 5 times negative 2 to the third power is negative 40. And then for my variables, I add my exponents. So these both have a 1 have a 1 exponent. So when I add, it would be 1 plus 6, which is 7. And then 1 plus 3, which is 4. So this would be our final answer. All right, 23, we have parentheses again, but we don't have any exponents on the outside of the parentheses. So we just have two things being multiplied together. So we're going to multiply our coefficients. So 6 times 3 is 18. And then we're going to add our exponents. So this x over here has a 1. So I'm going to do negative 2 plus 1, which is going to give me negative 1. And I'm going to do 1 plus negative 3, which gives me negative 2. Now here, I'm not done because we have negative exponents. So to make those exponents positive, I have to put them into the bottom of my fraction. And when I move them to the bottom, they become positive numbers. That's the whole reason we move them. All right, 24. So we have a fraction in parentheses, and we have an exponent on the outside. So this exponent of 3 needs to be distributed to everything in the parentheses. So for my coefficients, that would be negative 2 to the third power. And then for our variables, we just multiply. So 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. And then we also put it in the bottom because the bottom is in parentheses. So 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. All right, so now we're left with this. So first I need to figure out what negative 3 to the third power is, which is negative 8. And now I need to simplify by subtracting my exponents. So 6 minus 6 is 0, so those cancel. And 9 minus 12 is negative 3. And since it's a negative, I'm going to put it in the bottom to make it a positive 3. All right. Number 25, we have a fraction. So when you have numbers in front, you just simplify that fraction in your calculator. So I do 3 n over d 12, which would give me 1 over 4. And then I subtract my exponents. So 5 minus 3 is 2. And since it's positive, I'm going to put it in the top. And then for y, we have 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. So I'm going to put it in the bottom to make it a positive 1. All right, 26, we are graphing an exponential function. So I've given you half of the table, and then you need to finish it, graph it, and find the key characteristics. So to finish the table, you take your x values and you plug them in for x in the equation in your calculator. So when you do that, go ahead and fill out the table, pause the video, and then I'll have the table done when you come back. All right, so there's our table. So now we're going to graph it. So negative 2, negative 2.75 would be really close to negative 3. Negative 1, negative 2.5 would be right here in the middle. 0, negative 2, 1, negative 1, and 2, 1. So you should have a little bit of a curve. So that's what your exponential function should look like. Now for the key characteristics. To determine if it's growth or decay, I look back at the equation, and if the number that sits with the exponent of x is bigger than 1, that means that it is growth. So this is going to be growth. All right, so now for domain, remember we always just say all real numbers. For range, we have to look at where the graph is turning. So that would be right at this y value, and it never goes below that y value, so that means y is greater than 3, or you can, or negative 3, or you can write it negative 3 to positive infinity. And for your domain, you can also do negative infinity to positive infinity. Then your y-intercept, you look at your xy table, and wherever x is 0, that point is your y-intercept. And then for asymptote, it's the same thing as the range, you just put an equal sign. All right, for 27 and 28, these are the word problems. So you're using this formula. So the Mendez family just bought a home for $180,000. If the value of the home increases at a rate of 3% per year, find the approximate value of the home after 10 years. So A is your initial. So they bought the house for $180,000. Now it's increasing at a rate of 3%. So when I put my percentage in, it must be a decimal. So I'll do 3 divided by 100, which gives me 0.03. And then T is time, which is 10 years. Then I need to plug that into my calculator. Which will give me $241,904.95. All right, 28. Doug purchased land for $8,000 in 1995. The value of the land depreciated, which means decrease. So our formula is going to be the same, except it's 1 minus r instead of 1 plus r. And we want to find the value of the land in 2002. So he bought it for $8,000, so that's our initial. It's decreasing at 4%, so I would do 4 divided by 100, which gives me 0.04. And then for time, they give us a start year and an end year, so I would do 2002 minus 1995. Which gives me 7. So 7 years have passed. Then I'm going to type that into my calculator. And it's going to give me $6,011.58. All right, next in Unit 5, we talked about simplifying radicals. So we have the square root of 240 x to the 9th y to the 16th. So I like to break everything up. So square root of 240, square root of x to the 9th, and square root of y to the 16th. So square root of 240, I can simplify that in my calculator, which gives me 4 square root 15. So I'm going to underline that because that's completely simplified. Now for square root of x to the 9th, I can't just simplify that like that because 9 is an odd number. So when you have an odd number for your exponent, you have to break it up to 2 different square roots. The first one, you have to take 1 minus the exponent, so that would be x to the 8th. And then the second one will just be x, because you have to have a total of 9 x's here, because that's how many we started with. So now for the square root of x to the 8th, we can simplify that because that is an even number, so I divide it by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4, so that becomes x to the 4th. So that's simplified. Square root of just x can't be simplified, so I'm going to underline it. And then the last part, square root of y to the 16th, that we can go ahead and simplify because 16 is an even number. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. So now looking at everything I have underlined, I need to write my final solution. So anything not under a square root is going to come in the front. So 4, x to the 4th, and y to the 8th, that's all going to come in the front. Now, anything left under the square root, like 15 and x, I'm going to put those at the very end under the same square root. So that would be my final answer. All right, number 30, we're solving absolute value equations. So the first thing you have to do is isolate the absolute value. So I want to move everything that's around the absolute value of 9 minus 5 in. So first I need to move the negative 7, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And then I need to move the 5, so I'm going to divide by 5. So now I'm left with the absolute value of 9 minus 5n equals 9. So since my absolute value is isolated, I'm going to break this up into two different equations. And I'm going to equal it to 9 and negative 9. And now I'm going to solve for n. So I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides. So that gives me 0. Then I'm going to divide by negative 5. Which is going to give me 0. Then I'm going to do the other equation. Subtract 9 on both sides. And then divide by negative 5. So we have our two solutions. So we're going to write it as a list. So you're going to write it like this. All right, so that's all for Unit 5, which was on exponents and exponential functions. We're almost done. Now we just have a couple questions on Unit 6, which is the unit that we just went over. So this should all be really fresh on your mind. So 31 and 32 wants us to find the vertex and the axis of symmetry. So first I have to find my A, B, and C values. Then I'm going to plug it into our formula. And that's going to give me negative 2. Then to find the rest of my vertex, I just plug negative 2 into the equation. Which is going to give me 5. So my vertex is negative 2, 5. And then my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. All right, number 32, same thing. We're going to find our A, B, and C values. Now I'm going to plug 0 in to find the rest of my vertex. So my vertex is 0, 8, and then my axis of symmetry is 0. All right, 33, we're graphing a quadratic function. So first you have to find your axis of symmetry and your vertex, which I did not leave room for. So A is 2, B is negative 16, and C is 33. So So I'd have 16 over 2 times 2, which would give us 4. And then I would just plug 4 in there in my calculator. And when I do that, it's 1. So I want you to pause here, fill out the rest of the table, and graph it, and then we'll come back to do the key characteristics. All right, so that's what your table and your graph should look like. Now for our key characteristics for domain, it's all real numbers, or you can do negative infinity to positive infinity. Range, since it's facing up, is going to be y is greater than the y value of my vertex, which was 1. Or you can write it as 1 to positive infinity. Our vertex was 4, 1, and our axis of symmetry was 4. And then roots, this does not touch the x-axis at all, so this one does not have any roots. All right, for the next two, we're just describing the transformations. So when you have a negative sign in front of your x squared, or the parentheses with the x inside of it, that means that it's going to be flipped, or you can say reflected. Either one of those is okay. And then the number at the very end that does not have a letter beside it, that tells us whether it's going to go up or down. So since that's a -5, that means it's going to go down 5. All right, 35, same thing. So we have this +7 in parentheses. So the number in parentheses tells me whether we're going to go left or right. And since that one's positive, we're going to go left 7. And then the +4 at the end, remember, tells us whether it goes up or down. And since it's positive, that tells me it's going to go up 4. All right. Now for the last 4 questions, we're just going to be solving quadratic equations. Now, I'm going to be using some specific methods, but you can use whatever method that you felt most comfortable with the week that we went over all the different ways to solve a quadratic equation. So I'm going to kind of do a couple different methods so that you can see them. So for the first one, I'm going to do the factoring method when a is greater than 1. So that means I'm going to take the number that's in front and multiply it to the number at the end, which would give me 12. So now I'm left with x squared minus x equals 12. So now I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to give me -12. So that would be -1 and 12, -12 and 1, -2 and 6, -6 and 2, -3 and 4, -4 and 3. All right, so out of that list, now I need to figure out which ones add together to give me a -1, which is going to be -4 and 3. So I'm going to have x minus 4 and x plus 3 in parentheses. Now, before I can divide that up and solve for x, I have to bring the 2 back in that we multiplied at the beginning. So I'm going to divide those numbers by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, so this is going to become x minus 2. And then 3 over 2 gives me a decimal, so I'm just going to keep it as a fraction. So now that that's all done, we're going to break it apart into 2 separate equations and solve for x. And that would be our 2 solutions. All right, 38, I'm also going to do the factoring method, but this time there's no number in front of x squared. So I start with making my 2 parentheses. And now I need to list everything that multiplies together to give me 49. So 1 and 49. And 7 times 7. Okay, so from that short list, I need to figure out which ones add together to give me a negative 14. So that would be negative 7 times negative 7. So these are both, oh wait, whoops. So in the parentheses, it's going to be x minus 7. Now we're going to break those apart and solve for x. So we just have one answer, x equals 7. All right, for the last two, I'm going to be using the quadratic formula. So I need my a, b, and c values. And then that's the quadratic formula. So I'm just going to plug the numbers in. All right, then when I do that, I'm going to type that into my calculator twice, one with a plus sign and one with a minus sign. And when I do that, the two numbers you should get are 0 and negative 6. And then the last one, I'm going to do the same thing. So A is 5, B is 13, C is negative 6. I'm just going to plug it into the quadratic formula. And then when you type it in twice, one with a minus sign, one with a plus sign, you should get those two numbers. Well, actually, negative 3 should come first because it's smaller. All right, and then that completes the end of course test study guide.